All right, let's get right into it. We're always told the global economy is this giant, unstoppable machine, right? And that whatever we do as one single person barely even matters. But what if that's just not true anymore? What if there's a huge shift in power happening right under our noses? A quiet revolution that isn't being led by governments or big shot CDOs, but by us. I mean, this is the question we all ask ourselves, isn't it? When you're up against literally trillions of dollars and massive global companies, it's so easy to feel like your choices are just a drop in the ocean. And that feeling of being powerless, on the surface, it feels completely right. But here's the central idea we're digging into today. That feeling of powerlessness is actually becoming outdated. The real shift, the real revolution, it isn't happening in the streets with signs and protests. No. It's happening at the checkout, on your phone, every single time you decide to buy something. Okay, so let's just tackle this thing head on. Let's talk about the insignificance myth. We're going to completely dismantle this old way of thinking that your personal choices, what you buy, just don't matter in the grand scheme of things. Think about it. One person choosing, say, one brand of coffee over another, yeah, okay, that looks like a pretty meaningless event. But what happens when millions of people start making that exact same choice? Well, then it's not a tiny event anymore, is it? It's data. It becomes a huge economic signal, a message so loud and clear that companies and investors have absolutely no choice but to listen. So, how does this actually work in the real world? How do our choices turn into these massive market signals? Well, that brings us to the core mechanism behind this whole thing. The idea that every single time you buy something, you are casting a vote for the kind of world you want to live in. And the chain reaction here is surprisingly simple and direct. It all starts with you, with one single purchase. Now, when that one action gets repeated, thousands, maybe millions of times, it creates what we call a collective demand signal. And corporations, their entire survival depends on meeting demand, so they are forced to respond. And when enough companies respond, the entire market begins to shift. It's a total bottom-up transformation. And this really shows you just how big the change is. For decades, markets moved based on orders from the top. A big policy announcement, a speech from a central banker, that's what moved the needle. But today, the most important data comes from the bottom up. It's real-time consumer demand, what's trending on social media, brand loyalty, that's what dictates corporate strategy now. Investors aren't leading these trends anymore, they're scrambling to follow them. But it wasn't always like this, not by a long shot. So how did we get to this point? How did this idea go from some niche concept to a major market force? Well, it really all comes down to one clear tipping point: technology. You can actually watch it evolve. It started with these small, kind of niche boycotts, a few ethical brands that were on the fringe of the market. But then came e-commerce, which let you buy anything from anywhere. And social media gave everyone a megaphone to share what they thought. Suddenly, what used to be fringe opinions were now measurable on a global scale. And you know what they say in business? What gets measured gets managed. And the scale we're talking about now is just staggering. We are talking about trillions, with a T, trillions of dollars in investment money that is now being guided by things like environmental, social, and governance criteria, also known as ESG. And look, this isn't charity. This is investors who recognize that companies ignoring these consumer-driven values are taking on a massive, massive financial risk. This is so important to understand. When you see some huge corporation suddenly change its tune on sustainability or where it gets its materials, it's almost never because of some sudden change of heart. No, it's a cold, hard, pragmatic business decision. They are simply following the money, and the money is following you. It's following consumer demand. So let's look at the real-world impact of all this. Because this isn't just about which cool new brand gets popular. This is about how the actual physical infrastructure of the global economy, the factories, the shipping routes, the whole shebang, is being redesigned basically by your clicks. For so long, supply chains were built to do just one thing: be as cheap as possible, period. But now, because of pressure from all of us, they're being re-engineered for things like transparency and resilience. This is why you hear about nearshoring or reshoring. That's companies moving their factories closer to home. It's all driven by our demands for things like ethical sourcing, and it's forcing them to not put all their eggs in one basket with a single country supplier. And this really gets right to the heart of it. The power isn't in your one click.
It's in the accumulation of millions of those clicks. A million people all choosing a product because they can see exactly where it came from. That creates a wave of demand that can, and I mean this quite literally, move factories from one side of the world to the other.
And this has consequences that go way beyond just business. When those supply chains move, geopolitical power moves right along with them. By demanding changes in how and where things are made, consumers are indirectly messing with international relations. We're lowering our dependence on some countries and boosting the economic power of others, all without ever stepping into a voting booth. So where does all this go from here? Let's kind of wrap this up by looking at what the future of this quiet revolution is going to look like. Because trust me, this trend is only picking up speed. So in just a few years, markets are expected to look really different. We're going to see way faster product development based on instant feedback from you, the consumer. We'll see even more local production. We're going to see a steep decline for any brand that takes consumer trust for granted. And money, it's going to flow not just to the fastest growing companies, but to the ones that are the most resilient and have the best reputations. At the end of the day, you have to remember, this isn't about idealism. It's pure adaptation. Markets are adaptive systems. They don't have feelings or ideologies. Their one and only job is to meet demand. So they don't argue with what consumers want. They either adjust or they disappear. And that's where we'll leave it. The main thing to take away from all this is that you don't need to go out and get power to change the market. You already have it. It's right there, in your habits, in the choices you make every single day. The revolution is already happening. So the only real question left is, how are you going to use that power?